You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome to Last Call. I'm Erica Ducey.
And I'm Scott Rosenbaum.
And today we're recapping Bar Convent Brooklyn for everyone who wasn't able to attend. First off, kudos to the Bar Convent Brooklyn team. This was the most packed of all the conferences that I've been to this year. There was hundreds of brands sampling and probably thousands of attendees. I attended several of the education sessions, and these were all overflow, standing room only. A real highlight for me was that we held our first Business of Drinks coffee meetup, which was attended by dozens of our listeners and some of our guests and supporters. So thank you so much to everyone who came out. That was such a wonderful way to kick off the conference. So Scott, what did you find interesting this year at Bar Convent?
Yeah, it was a great conference, like you said. Really great weather on Wednesday, the second day of the conference, which helped mobility and moving around between buildings. There were a number of trends, right? I wasn't so much taken by any singular new product, but I felt in the zeitgeist a few things. First, I found myself questioning: is every other booth gonna have some type of coffee liqueur, coffee spirit? Are we at peak coffee? People who say like the espresso martini is passé or done with, that certainly wasn't the vibe I was getting at the conference. And I even see some innovation in this area. I had the opportunity to taste from the French producer Combier a clear coffee liqueur. So they distill it and they sweeten it, but they don't re-infuse or add any color or coffee after the fact. And it was delicious. Not yet released, but really curious, interesting thing that I'd love to see some cocktails made from in the future.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I think, the big thing that I heard people talking about really in every part of the conference, at the after parties, at nearby bars, at restaurants, and even in a lot of the sessions, was around the impending closure of RNDC. That news had just been announced, and it was a hot topic. So, distributor contacts, we're talking about layoffs and personnel moves across all of that tier. And several of the suppliers that I talked with were either looking for new representation, from any types of distributors, or, shifting from one distributor to another for a variety of reasons. So I feel like for me, the content of the conference was really around distributor conversations. And there was even a great talk. So there was this talk through the Park Street University stage called Distributor Collaboration in 2025, How to Navigate Today's Tougher Market. And boy, they did not pull any punches there. They had people from RNDC, Breakthrough Beverage, and Winebow, and they were not sugarcoating. So there was a couple things in this particular session that stood out to me that I thought would be useful to attendees who weren't able to make it to the event. First was that distributors are no longer just delivery partners. They're taking on more of a curatorial role than ever because they're turning away more brands than ever. And so they have to be incredibly surgical about what they are taking on. Melissa Lonan from RNDC, she said that her team is getting pitched by dozens of brands a day. And she just, they're saying no because the portfolio is full. So, one takeaway was that if you don't come to the table with a focused, well-funded plan, you're not getting in. Second, from that conversation was that there's a massive shift in mindset about what a win looks like. So Monique Houston from Winebow, who we've had on the Business of Drinks podcast previously in episode 49, she said something that really stuck with me, which is, every initial sale is a liability, right? So think about that. If you walk into a bar or a store and the product just sits there, you've now created a problem for your distributor, for the account, and for your brand. So the real work starts after the sale. And this was repeated in conversation after conversation. And then third, the big thing here that I think that everyone should be thinking about that's bringing their brand up is the brands that tend to be winning right now are really scrappy, local, and laser focused. John Oliver from Breakthrough, he said that the brands that impress him most now are the ones who are going really deep on a single market, even a single neighborhood, and showing pull there. So it's not hype, it's not press, it's not anything but sales velocity. And he's seen brands walk in saying, we've got 1,000 accounts in California with 3,000 cases sold, and we did it all self-distributing. And that is the type of thing that's turning his head. So those were the takeaways from that session that I was like, oh yeah, I feel like we want to share this.
I love it. I love it. Was it BCB or was it a, business of drinks reunion? I sat in on a panel with Brian Rosen and a former guest, and he put some really stark numbers out there. He said if I were launching a drinks brand, a spirits brand, I wouldn't attempt to do that with less than $1 million. And I think people's ears really perked up to that end. On the same panel, Maria Perriman said that fundraising today she said it's as hard, if not harder, to raise $1 million today in 2025 than it was to raise $5 million in 2021. And again, I think people were really taken aback by that stark reality. But simultaneously, there was a lot of optimism at the conference, and not necessarily something that I've seen at conferences earlier in the year. There was, I'd say, a sense of community, particularly among different geographic suppliers. So here, two common themes I saw throughout the conference was what I'll call, alternative Mexican spirits. So not just tequila, not just mezcal, but those beverages on the periphery that we don't necessarily think of when we think of Mexico, like gin, like whiskey. Yes, there were agave adjacent products like Sotal there. But they were really trying to, push the country as a whole rather than just a single category. Same thing with Japan. Saw Japanese vermouth, amaro, rum, gin, not just your typical whiskey. And for me, that was really particularly exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's true. I did get such a great sense of community and energy from that conference that I think has been lacking in a lot of other industry events that I have gone to recently. So I do think, big kudos to the Bar Convent Brooklyn team for putting on such a helpful show in a variety of ways. The sampling opportunities, I think the discovery for any type of on-premise or retail account for distributors, etc., was really unparalleled. And it was really a lot of suppliers just bringing their passion to the table. The principals of the brands were behind the tables, sampling their products out, and it really was a pretty exciting event. So that's all we've got time for today, but thank you so much for joining us on Business of Drinks. Follow us on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening, and tap the notification button so you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. And help us spread the word. Click the star ratings and share on social because it really does help us find new listeners. Finally, if there's something that you'd like us to cover on the podcast, tell us. We're at podcast@businessofdrinks.com or reach out via Instagram or LinkedIn. We really do want to hear from you and we do respond to messages. We'll see you next time.